Yes, my name is Alain Scheiman, and I'm with Passion Spirits. And this company has been, I started it 10 years ago. And the reason I'm here is because 10 years ago, when I first started the company, it had nothing to do with direct to consumer or e-commerce. I came from, the big companies, the Allied Domecq, the Pernod Ricard. So I had worked a few years in that background. And I started Passion Spirits as a sales agency within Florida in Miami for emerging brands from all over the world, from Latin America, from Europe, that wanted to get some sales support. But 6 years ago or so, we decided to go into the direct-to-consumer, business in the United States, and by doing so, we were one of the first companies or platforms to do it. The reason we decided to do it is because we saw kind of an opportunity happening in the market. And that's why, I would like to start this presentation with that quote that many of you might already know, that by Steve Jobs, that says that innovation is the ability to see change as an opportunity, not a threat. And that's exactly what's happening right now in the United States. Although the logistics of it, the three-tier system that we'll go briefly into it in the United States, continues to be the same, there is certainly an opportunity that some companies, us being one of them, is trying to tap into. So a little history for those of you that are looking into entering the US market, and you might have heard about the three-tier system, but it's not quite clear what it is. Well, prohibition, it was a nationwide constitutional ban on the production, importation, and transportation of alcoholic beverages. This, as most of you know, that was done until 1933. So in December 1933, that all ended, and the US government established a framework of commercialization that's called the three-tier system. And that three-tier system relates to the producer, the distributor, and the retailer. So for 80 years, and I should say maybe for 20 years, since people are buying things online and it has become more of a thing, well, people deem direct-to-consumer as something impossible within our industry, because if you're the brand owner, or you're the producer, or you're the importer, even the distributor, you're not allowed to sell direct to the consumer, just like any brand in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia, like we saw in China, do sell direct to consumer. In many cases, the brands themselves, you cannot do that in the United States. So it was deemed impossible, but like so many other things, when someone finds a way, like 5 or 6 people are finding it the same route to market, and they all start doing it at the same time. In terms of the arena that any of you should expect if you are going into the United States, is very particular. It's very different than any other part in the United States. In the United States, you have these big distributors that you all have heard about. The Breakthrough Beverage, the Southern Glaciers, the RNDCs, these big distributors that, are great. And eventually, if your brand grows and you really make it in the United States, hopefully one of these distributors can carry your brand and help you get to the next level. But there is a reality that for emerging brands, you're going to be one of the other suppliers. And if you look into the portfolio of any of the big distributors, it's going to look like that. 80%, 90% of the focus at the end of the day of the big distributors is going to go to the big brands. And the small suppliers, as much as you have a great relationship with the distributor, well, you're going to be not be giving the support that you need to have. So in my view, you need to find a new alternative and a new way to go into the market, right? So you actually mentioned that it was 50 states, 50 countries, and I have that in a slide right there. It's exactly like that. If you think that you go to the United States and you just made a deal with, let's say, one of the big distributors, and they told me that they were going to launch my brand in 50 states, that doesn't happen. They're going to test you in one market, and if your brand does fairly well, they're going to try it in another market, and so on. In each market, you have to appoint a distributor. And in each market, you have to prove yourself and prove your brand and go to the on-premise and the off-premise, open accounts, open liquor stores, and eventually you get into a distribution of 50 states. It's going to take you 5-10 years at least, and that's if you are traveling all the time in the United States with heavy budgets. And that takes me to the next point there, which is expensive. launching a brand in the United States, as we all know, is very expensive. And some of the reasons is, everybody's trying to gain the same shelf in the liquor store. Everybody's trying to get to the same menu in the cool bars, the mixology bars. But if everybody's trying to get, well, you're not only competing with all the other emerging brands out there, you're competing with the big brands. You're competing with the big suppliers, and those big suppliers are always going to outspend the small players, and that's not the fight that you want to play. If you want to if you want to beat Goliath and you're David here, you got to look at it at a different way, right? So we all know, in the United States at least, we see what's being called the decline of retail. We all know these brands. Just like a couple of weeks ago, Forever 21, it's another one that got bankrupt. And then Best Buy is still there, but they're having those issues. Toys R Us, Sears, Barnes and Noble, Sports Authority, all companies that either they're not in existence anymore, or that they're struggling. And who's taking their place? Well, Amazon for sure is in, and I'm not talking here about the wine and spirits industry. In general, Amazon is gaining the whole e-commerce and direct-to-consumer space. And other companies, Wayfair, Etsy, Lululemon, Dick's, are companies that have been able, that in many times they start like brick and mortars, but they have been able to tap into the e-commerce part of things very successfully, and that's where they're getting most of their business right now. So how did we do what we do right now? And how were we able to offer a direct-to-consumer, and I say quote-unquote because it's not really, it's just the perception of a direct-to-consumer for US customers that wanted to buy a particular product. You still have the three-tier distribution. You have the importer as the first tier or producer, then the distributor at the second tier, and then the retailer. Well, what we did, and many companies like us have done, is we have created a platform, in our case, actually a unique online store for each brand that works with us, that connects directly to the retailer. So everything that we are doing is not more than connecting the consumer, a consumer that is interested in purchasing a certain product, with the retailers that are already selling it. And if they're not really already selling it, we make sure that they sell it. So in that sense, the three-tier system is maintained. The product comes, if you're working with an importer like Parkfit, for instance, it goes to a distributor and then to a retailer and then to the consumer. We as a platform, and most of the platforms out there, the ones that are being compliant with the three-tier system laws, are not touching the product. The product is going in the same way, and that's where the opportunity is that I was telling you before, because logistically, legislation is changing, every state is different, but while that happens, the three-tier system is still a reality, and this is the only way that we have found in order for the consumer to have the perception that he's buying direct from the source. And why does he get this perception? Because in the case of our clients, we tell them that they should add a buy now button in their online store. A big mistake, in my view, that many clients do, or many brands, is that they feel that when a customer is Googling their brand and ends up in their website, it's because they want to learn more about the brand. And I have news for you. It's not. It's because they want to buy it. If you are Googling, if you're not in the industry and you are Googling a brand of tequila or vodka, it's most likely because you want to purchase that brand. So what I tell my clients all the time is put a buy now button that, that looks and feel like the rest of your website. That is the first thing that the consumer sees. And then you can track with your Google Analytics how many people are actually, from your traffic, going and clicking into buy now button, and you will be impressed that it's a big percentage. Okay? So in terms of how we do it, well, the consumer goes to the online store, places an order, just if it were an order in any other online platform, he receives an order confirmation, which the retailer receives as well, together with the funds of the customer, and then he puts together the packages and he ships it out via the courier company that he uses. Most of the times it's FedEx, UPS, and sometimes local courier partners, and that's the way that it happens. It's very simple, but it's simply connecting the consumer to the retailer. So the key here is to generate traffic. If you do all this, even if you work with us or one of the other companies out there, and you don't have an active marketing and PR strategy to generate traffic to your website, nothing is going to happen. We have brands that sell close to nothing online, and we have brands that it might be, in your mind, well, what's the volume that I can expect? I get asked this question all the time. We have brands that sell thousands of bottles per month. How many I can say, and it depends on the brand. One thing I can tell you, 100% of the products that we represent, and it's over 1,000 products, are emerging brands. We don't represent the big boys and Pernod, Bacardi. One day, hopefully we will. But right now, it's all emerging brands. And these emerging brands, the ones that are doing good, are the ones that are getting the word out. And we'll get into. Well, I can get into how do they get the word out. It's it's important. Many people are telling me all the time, I spend so much money in social media, in my own Instagram, in my own Facebook. Well, that's great, but going to the point 2 over there, it's not about your social media platform. It's about the influencer social media platform that your customers are following. If those people, of course, you're thinking celebrity marketing, you're thinking famous people, but there is, from Leonardo DiCaprio to your local blogger, you can decide who you work with. Obviously, if you don't have the budgets to work with Leonardo DiCaprio, which I would imagine that most people don't, you work with local bloggers. You work with people that are being followed, that have a great following in social media, and that's what gets a little bit of the word out. I put a couple of examples with their permission. Actually, one of them is here in the convention. Uncle Nearest Whiskey is one of our very successful brands. This is a brand that has an amazing story behind it. And the story is that, there was this slave that used to work in the Jack Daniel's distillery in the 19th century, that he was really the master distiller, and apparently the person in charge of teaching a young Jack Daniel how to produce its whiskey, right? Obviously, he was a slave. He was never given any recognition. So, he died with any recognition or anything like that. Today, these people are bringing his name back, and they have created this brand with that story behind it. Well, that's all they needed in order to get big media behind it. And people, PR companies work by getting a story and pitching it out to different media. And the New York Times was the first media outlet that took this story. So if you are in the media in New York Times and it cost them $0 to do, they just had a beautiful story behind it, and a story that really works in the United States because slavery it's a big taboo in the United States, and you have to be in the right side of industry of history and everything, obviously. But this brand is tapping into that, and with that story, they have found so many media outlets that have published them, and they're getting the traffic to their website that translates in online sales, because they get to the website, they click on buy now, and then they place the order, and we arrange the delivery. So influencers and also direct marketing. You have to be involved in reaching out to thousands of people, thousands of American consumers, if you want to actually start selling it. If you don't have, a database of thousands of American consumers, some people do have that. We have that, as you can imagine, thousands of people that have purchased from our platform in the last 6 years. Well, you can tap into that, and those are what we see. These strategies, I wanted to put them here because it's what we are seeing that works for our clients. We don't particularly do any of these strategies ourselves, but it's what we've seen that our clients have done, right? So, as a summary, I believe, yes, as a summary, why think in direct to consumer if you're going to the United States? If you're already there, by all means, but even if you're thinking in going in the United States, I would claim that you do this first, that before you have to go into New York and Florida and Chicago and California and put people in the street and spend marketing and you're going to spend a lot of money building your brand like that, and you have to do it. But in the meantime, or you could start, because $1 goes a long way when you are doing e-commerce marketing in general. So the idea here, my approach is that direct-to-consumer is really a new distribution channel. You have on-premise and off-premise, and although Direct-to-consumer has always been seen as part of off-premise because we need the off-premise to operate in compliance with three-tier system laws. It is a whole new channel that the IWSR is looking at for the first time last year. That is no coincidence. You know, many things are happening there. There are low costs of entry, which is something that probably is the first time in history that in this industry you can say low cost of entry for a spirits or wine or beer brand in the United States. It's normally very expensive. This way, it's actually way less expensive because we're finding a way to get the consumer without having to spend so much money. And if you are an emerging brand wanting to launch in the United States, you are in a survival mode. You need the return of investment. And before direct-to-consumer, honestly, I never saw a brand making money in the first 3 years. I would tell people, you know, it's like we have a 3-year business plan and you're gonna break even on 3 years, and on year 4 you might start making a little bit of money. And that's still true if you do the traditional route, which you have to do. But many of our clients have started to make money from month 1 if they are putting their money into marketing and PR and the story and the word out. So this is the big takeaway. If you want to take one thing from this presentation, is that you can start making money if you do it the right way from the beginning. The penetration, well, together with the decline of retail that we have, that I mentioned before, there are certain consumers that don't go to the mall anymore, that don't go to retail. These millennials that are buying, especially in the United States, everything online, that they buy everything through Amazon, they also drink. But guess what? They're not going to the liquor stores. So if you're putting all of your money behind liquor stores and tastings and this, well, you might be losing of a chunk of consumers that today are fueling the e-commerce business, and that if your brand is only in the e-commerce business at the beginning, well, you're gonna get a piece of that huge untapped market that we're all still learning to appreciate. And finally, you know, a thing that we particularly do that I think that it's very important for emerging brand is that you understand who your customer is. You know, if we were to work together, one of the things that we tell people is that they have to, you know, who's buying. If you actually have an online store, and you actually touched on it briefly, that in France people go to Carrefour online and they might order a bottle of wine. Yeah, but who ordered that? Where Carrefour knows, but you as a brand owner do not know. Well, in our case, we have put together a platform that allows you to go into a back-end, you know, customer relationship management platform that tells you who's purchasing. And that is unique information that you need as time goes by, because if 1 year after you have launched your brand in the United States, if you did very good and you did 20,000 online orders, well, guess what? Now you have 20,000 names, email address, phone numbers of people that have your product in their house, and you can create loyalty programs. And all this untapped world of that all the other brands that are not wines and spirits are doing, now you can start, you know, doing. So basically, that's it for me. And like you said at the beginning, we'll take questions. Thank you.